Hello, welcome to Story 2019. Thank you so much for coming. We've still got people coming in, which is amazing. There are still some seats kind of on the edges, so do make your way in. Hope you're all enjoying your studies. Just before we get started, to let you know, in case of a fire, we would have to leave the fire exits and group out on the field. And if you need the toilet at any time, there are portaloos out in the back behind the marquee. But on to today, my name's Naomi. I'm a fourth year studying physics at Castle, and I'll be your host for all of the Story Lunchtimes. Story Lunchtimes are a chance to explore and question the Christian faith and to consider how it impacts our story. So today's focus is a story for the runner-up, why you are worth more than your achievements. And I think this is so relevant for us as Durham students. So you're in for an absolute treat with Glynn today. Glynn is our visiting speaker for the week, and he'll be doing a 20-minute talk, followed by an opportunity for you to ask some of your own questions. So in that time, I would love to take questions from the floor, but also we have a number that you can text, which will come up on the screen. And if you have questions during the talk, then you can just text them in, and we'll have a look at them later. So Glynn, would you like to come and join me on stage?
Hi, folks.
So, Glynn, yesterday we learned that you used to be a professor of psychiatry at Bristol. Now, can you enlighten us? What is the difference between psychiatry and psychology?
Yeah, a lot of people get confused with that. One quick answer is psychiatrists get paid more, but maybe that's not the one you're looking for. But psychiatrists, I did medicine first, and after my basic training in medicine surgery, my house jobs in hospital, I then went on to specialize in psychiatry, much as people specialize in surgery or medicine or whatever. So psychiatry looks at problems in living, and particularly breakdowns of mental functioning, and we're all relying on hugely complex mental processes right now to make sense of the world. And we're relying on them kind of lining up and working as usual. But of course, they're huge, and often they don't work as usual. And psychiatrists try to get alongside, figure out, and work with people who are struggling in terms of their mental health. And because they're doctors, we look at it through a medical lens, but that isn't all. We also try to take a holistic view and work with our psychologist colleagues because they bring additional strengths from some of their extra research and so on.
Great. That sounds wonderful. Thank you. And how have you found being in Durham so far?
Well, it's great to be back because my daughter was here at the I think it was the best college, Chad's. Is that right? She told me that anyway. I haven't actually seen any of it yet because I've been a bit bogged down in other things, but I'm looking forward this afternoon to heading up to the cathedral and doing that. So it's great to be back.
Well, enjoy your visit to the cathedral.
Thank you.
I'll leave it up to you.
Thank you. And thank you so much, everybody, for turning up. Believe me, I do not take for granted that you've turned out in your lunch hour. And it's great to be with you. And here's what we're thinking about, why you're worth more than your achievements. Now, Ed Koch, who was, you may or may not have heard about, the mayor of New York back in the 80s, quite a quirky mayor, famously greeted people with the question, "Hey, how am I doing?" Which was a kind of a clever twist on the more usual New York greeting made famous by Joey and Friends, "Hey, how you doing?" And yet it tells us what politicians worry about most. How am I doing? What do you think of me? And a few of us here, I hope some of us will run for office in that way. But the research literature on self-esteem suggests that unconsciously we are all asking that question every day in almost every human encounter. How am I doing? What do you think of me? Of course, we didn't really need the psychological sciences to tell us what we already knew, did we? Back in 1798, the father of modern economics, what was his name? Shout! Anyone know? Adam Smith, thank you. I was going to say, gosh. Right, Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, he said this: "To what purpose is all the toil and bustle of this world? What is the end of greed and ambition, of the pursuit of wealth and power and preeminence? Is it to supply food and drink, clothes? The wages of the poorest laborer can get you a pair of jeans. What then are the advantages of that great purpose of human life which we call bettering our condition, getting on in life? And he says it's this. Whoops. To be observed, to be attended to be noticed. You see that in yourself? We want to be noticed. We want people to think well of us. And maybe you do see that in yourself, but I'm sure there's a few here actually, and you say, nope, that's not me. I'm the captain of my own ship, thank you very much, and when I win, that's a matter for me. And I don't care about other people's opinions. Well, there was a psychologist called Mark Leary who gathered together a group of people just like you. People who said, I'm independent of other people's approval of me. And he got them carried out quite a nice experiment. He got them sit in a room and talk into a microphone about themselves. And they'd been told that in the next room, there was another person using an electronic scoring system which was being fed back to them as they spoke, which was an indicator of how much they wanted to partner with them for the next stage of the experiment, which was going to be quite challenging. So next door there's someone listening, and if they score 10, wow, I want to be with this person. If it's 0, please, no, I'm out of here. So these people kicked off talking about themselves. You know, I'm George, I'm 20, I'm studying economics right now, and although I'm in the north of England for most of the year, actually I come from the home counties, and I'm at the University of Durham, one of the top universities in the Russell Group, and I've been actually this lunchtime I went to a Christian Union event. You know, you're off the scale now, 0. Of course, the number was bogus feedback. Never take part in any psychologist's experiment. It's always rigged in some way. But after the experiment, when they measured those people's what's called state self-esteem, the results showed that whether they belonged to the I'm captain of my own ship or not group, when they felt rejected and devalued and unwanted, their self-esteem just fell, measurably so, statistically measurably so, and significantly so in kind of does it matter terms. It did seem to really matter. So when they don't esteem us, it's much harder to esteem ourselves. And so we work for likes and ticks and approval, feedback. So this is our topic for this few minutes together. Story for the runner-up. Why you're worth more than those achievements. Why there's a different way of looking at this. And briefly, I'm going to look at 3 questions together. First, why do we struggle as humans to be recognized favorably in this way? What's it about? Second, if it's not on other people's opinions of us, then on what or on whom should we rely for this inner sense of worth and significance? And the third question is, does the Christian faith have anything unique or worthwhile to say about this issue? So first, this struggle for recognition that we're talking about. Well, why? Well, as with all complex human behaviors, there are multiple factors involved. Of course there are. Multiple levels of explanation, which you probably have to pull together and fit together. In evolutionary theory, you may suppose that being reassured that you belong to a group increases your chances of survival. That makes sense. Or we want recognition because higher social status, which comes with recognition, delivers power and influence. And we like power and influence. Comes rafted with all kinds of social goods and privileges. Or more personally, you come from a home where your confidence was just consistently undermined. I remember a woman telling me, she said, I don't know why people do the high jump. Can't get my head around it. She said, why ever would you want to do the high jump? What happens when you finally get over the bar? They always move it higher. And there was she said, my father was like that. No matter how high I jumped for him, he always moved it higher. I've never felt anything. I'm working for his approval. He's dead now, but he's still in my head, and I'm working for his approval. So this is another part of why this is a big issue for many of us, because we come from backgrounds where we've been beaten down. And so this is part of where this desire to, if we can't get it from my dad, will you give me it? And there's a deeper need being met too, as subconscious creatures. Humans not only evaluate each other, but we evaluate ourselves. And as we've just seen, when they like us, then there seems to be almost an internal mechanism in which we then like ourselves. And of course, when we like ourselves, when we esteem ourselves, we experience a sense of confidence in our ability to flourish and to get our degree from here and to go out and make something of the world. And we feel we've the right to be here and to be happy in who we are. And that kind of sets up a virtuous circle that leads to people, if you're confident, if you're out there, people, well, liking you. And so you feel more confident. And so we find ourselves on a treadmill. It works as long as we can keep them liking us. It sounds good, doesn't it? So what's the problem? If self-esteem good for us and being a winner, getting social status is the route to self-esteem, then bring it on. And of course, you know what the problem is. The problem is what happens when you stop achieving. When they don't like us anymore, when you can't make it to the top, and most of us don't. Who's this? Johnny Wilkinson. I've got to stop using this illustration. It's so out of date. But you remember back in 2003, Johnny Wilkinson, no, you don't remember, but back in 2003, take it from me, Johnny Wilkinson scored a really famous dropped goal for England in that famous and celebrated World Cup match against Australia. And I think it was something like 29 seconds before the end. And he landed that perfectly. And overnight, he became a sensation, a national treasure. He was wheeled in to see the Queen. He was wheeled in to see Tony Blair, can you believe? So he was a really big, treasured guy. And yet, he wrote in his book, Tackling Life, 2008, he wrote this about that kick, okay, that famous kick. He said, within hours of that kick, I was tumbling out of control. You see, I'm only as good as my last kick. I'm afflicted with a powerful fear of failure, and I didn't know how to free myself from it. I'm only as good as my last kick. And when you stake your sense of worth on your last kick, you're always kicking. And sooner or later, friends, other people are going to, and they kick a lot better than you. And you're going down the pecking order. Now, what are you worth? It's the boom or bust ego. When you get the good news, the email comes, you got the first, it's boom. And then when it comes and you didn't get the job despite the first because they didn't like your personality, it's bust. So if it's not pinning our worth on other people's esteem of us, where do we go looking? Well, cue the rise of the self-esteem movement. Came along in the 50s and the 60s. And we touched on this yesterday. And what I'm talking about now relates to what we were saying about identity, because here psychologists and therapists played what seemed to be a masterstroke. There's only one reliable way to avoid having to rely on other people's approval, they said. Give it yourself. Self-esteem. I value myself. I'm worthy. I'm happy. I attract people to myself like magnetism. I'm full of confidence. I go out into the world. I'm a winner. I'm special. You know the thing. So many kids brought up on this kind of ideology, and it gained enormous traction through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and its cultural legacy is everywhere about us today. Here's something I snapped in Waterson's just 3 months ago, I think it was. I totally got this, a journal to remind myself that I am truly awesome and capable, and that I'm seriously going to nail it, no matter what it is. And no matter how much I secretly doubt myself, because doubt is just a 4-letter word, even though I know it's not actually a 4-letter word. I think he's got there or something. But you see, I'm totally this is the power of positive thinking, so called. The problem is, does it work? And there's a raft of evidence to suggest that it doesn't. Now, any of you are interested, Roy Blaumeister, Nicholas Emler, Jennifer Tweng, amongst many others, Jennifer Crocker, I could name lots, no evidence that self-praise delivers the health, educational, or social outcome. That is a reasonable summary of the evidence and where we're at. Look, here's a quick experiment. This is Joanna Wood, psychologist in Ontario, Hamilton, Ontario, the university. She took a sample of people and she divided them randomly into 3 conditions. The first group were given a pack of these self-boosting card statements. I'm special. I'm going to go out today and win the world. You see? And they were asked to spend 20 to 30 minutes every day in a little kind of selfie appreciation time, meditation. And they were asked to meditate, to focus positively on those statements, to try and absorb them into their soul. The next group were given the same cards, but they were given a different task. They said, we want you to meditate on how this is true and how it's not true of me. The third group were told to do nothing at all. So how do we get on when we follow these people up at 3 and 6 months and we carry out a raft of psychological measures and then compare the groups? Well, people in this group, those who had low self-esteem when they went into the study, after 3 and 6 months of boosting themselves, they actually felt worse about themselves. In fact, Joanna Wood says that these seem to help people who already have a good view. If you're Donald Trump, this goes down a treat. You know, hey, I'm good. It works. That's fine. You feel even a little better after doing this. But if you go in there with this nagging sense of self-doubt, you feel worse. Why? Because in the end, it's just your own propaganda. That's all. You're on your own. And so to wrap up, is there another way of looking about this? And we're back in the marketplace of ideas now that I was talking about yesterday, and I'm back with my stall, and I'd love to share with you what the Christian vision for human flourishing says about this, because we're moving beyond the world of psychological models and experiments into the world of ideas about what it means to be human. Psychology can't answer those big questions, the why questions, questions of meaning and destiny. Why am I here? What am I about? Why does my soul long for something more like this? So let me share what the Christian worldview has. And later on, you may want to get up behind your stall and say, well, I'm an eco-warrior, and here's how I think it affects my... But here's the Christian view that I want to share from my own heart. And you've got these Mark's Gospels there, but I'm not going to be reading from that today. I'll return to it tomorrow. I want to share with you some words from another Gospel. It's John's Gospel, and most of you will have heard these words read every Christmas carol service you've been to. They're amongst the most magisterial words ever written. And it's this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. First chapter of John, jumping on to verse 11. He came to that which was his own, but his own didn't receive him. They didn't want him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, born of natural descent, not born of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And just three quick things from those verses as we wrap up. Three things they show us about this person, Jesus, and his story. First, they're saying that in the life and death story of Jesus, God was revealing himself to us. We haven't been left to work it out, it's saying. That, of course, we've been given intelligent and rational minds, and there's so much to explore and find out for ourselves because we're made in the image of God. We've got all of that. But for the big, ultimate questions that transcend our ability to understand, we've not been left on our own. The Christian faith doesn't lift you up and say, let's be real about yourself, and then leave you dangling with your own propaganda. God has spoken. It's a revealed faith. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word means communication. Second, John's saying that in this man, Jesus of Nazareth, God revealed himself to us. In Jesus, the Word is out, and his name is Jesus. You see, he was with God in the beginning. Immediately we switch from the Word to a person. God revealed who he is to us. Now, God could have relied on messengers, prophets, and holy men, but uniquely in the Christian faith, the Christian faith says that God came to reveal himself. The Word became flesh. God became human, incarnation, God among us. One of the most stunning and mysterious thing that's happened on this earth. And we, the eyewitnesses to this, John says, have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace, truth. We liked him. So second, in this story, God reveals himself to us. But third, in Jesus and in the way Jesus treated other human beings, God not only showed us who he is, he showed us who we are. That's there too. And there's two things he showed us. We are lost. Both begin with L. Lost. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. He came to bring light in the darkness because we're not seeing things clearly. We're lost. Can't see well. We're blinded by our own. Well, do you remember what we called it yesterday? The crack that runs through everything. Our own inward-lookingness, me-firstness, our rejection of God's authority and power makes us blind. And he came to cast light. And we're like orphans as well. Kids who ran away and forgot who they were. But we're lost, and then we're loved. Yes, we screwed up. Sin, the human propensity to screw things up. Yes, we screwed up, and there's a crack through everything about us. But he still came after us. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Verse 11, he came to that, which was, God still comes after what was blind and what was lost. And he says, I want you. And I want to give you a fresh start. To be born again. It's an astonishing term. Born not of natural descent or of human decision or a husband's will. Born of God. Completely fresh start. A new beginning to you. Now I want you to imagine for a minute with me. I want you to thought experiment with me. Okay? I want you to imagine, I know many of us will be Christians here, but if you're not, I want you to imagine that you are. Now, really, will you do the work? I mean, it's a proper thought. I want you to think your way into, I became a Christian this week. Just think about that, you see. I know it's never going to happen, Not in a month of Sundays is it going to happen. Although you might want to think, if that's your gut reaction, it's never going to happen. Crumbs, go and tell my brother that I became a Christian. Live that, hold that down. Tell my parents I've joined the God Squad or got God, even worse. I never live. All I want to say is, fair enough. If that's your gut reaction, just think for a minute, what is that telling me about my objectivity here and my willingness to look at this honestly? I just want to say that you wouldn't be the first person who in looking at this honestly has risen above other people's expectations of you and those social pressures. So the thought experiment. If what I'm saying is true, what would that feel like for you? How would you handle this issue of how much am I worth? Well, two things. First, you would begin to say no to the need to earn other people's approval. You'd only begin, it's a start, but you'd begin instead to rely on the love that will never go away, which is God's love for you, his coming for you, his wanting you, his going to the cross and drawing into himself all the crackness of our lives, paying its penalty, so we have a fresh start. Now, that is the basis on which you'd begin to base your sense of self, security, sense of being in the grip of someone who'll never abandon me, who knows all about me, who knows the stuff I've done and the stuff I'm going to fall into still, my flaws and cracks. He still loves me. That's what you'll begin to do. And second, as a follower of Jesus, you start on this story, you'll begin to look at your strengths and achievements in a different way as well, because you don't need them to boost your ego. You'll begin to sense, just begin, it's a slow process, it's a journey, but you'll begin to sense God's pleasure in them. That'll be enough. Let's say you score the impossible goal and they carry you out on their shoulders. How do you feel? Let's say you play the most stunning, you've stunned yourself, let alone the audience, cello concerto, and they rise to their feet and you leave the stage. How do you feel? In this story, in God's story, what you do is you feel his pleasure. You bear his image. You feel the beauty of being an image bearer of God himself and doing good and beautiful things. But as you leave the stage, and then you go out through the stage door and you step over a homeless person, don't for 1 minute think that what you just did makes you a a blind bit more important than that person in God's eyes. You're not more important. You're a great cellist. You're a phenomenal footballer. And you're great. It doesn't make you a whit more important or loved or glorious in what you can become in God's eyes. And so that's the vision the Christian gospel sets before us. And I'm not going to pretend that when you become a follower of Jesus, all this happens overnight. You ask the other Christians in here. They're struggling, and I'm struggling. We're on a journey in which this becomes a reality. You don't turn around habits of a lifetime just like that. So this is a long journey of discipleship, learning. That's what it means, discipleship. So it's a long process, but starting the journey needn't be a long process. It shouldn't be a long process, because in the end, you've got to dive in. You've got to take the decision. You've got to say, I think I want this to be true of me. To be one of those people who did receive him, who said yes to God's yes to them. Which is why we're kind of having this week, because we want to share this truth, and our hope is that you'll really just think about it, or at least go away having looked at it honestly for yourself. Who is Jesus, and what does that mean for who am I? I'm going to stop there. What are we doing tomorrow? We're looking at suffering tomorrow, pain and suffering. You know, whether you can believe in God if there's this stuff going on, and we're looking at it tonight as well. And then I'm looking at some psychological explanations for religion on Thursday. Is it kind of an artifact of evolutionary theory or evolutionary process and so on? But right now we're back to Naomi. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Glynn. Can we give Glynn a round of applause? Yeah, thank you. Just before we move on to questions, I want to draw your attention to three things that were either on your chairs or on your tables. Firstly, I can figure out how to do this. Okay. Firstly, you'll see Glynn briefly mentioned this. It's a copy of a book that calls itself Uncover Mark. It's basically Mark's Gospel from the Bible with some extra kind of study guides in there to help you understand it and read it for yourself or read it with a friend. These are for you to take away. We have a ton of them. I saw them in the back of the stage. We have a ton of them, so please do take them away. We're not precious about keeping them in the marquee. We then have these little green flyers, which are Connect cards. We would love to hear from you if you want to get in touch or just leave any comments. Write whatever you like on there and then put them in the little boxes at the back with people with the story jumpers on your way out. Also, if you do put your personal details on here, just make sure that you tick the box at the bottom saying that you're happy for us to use them to get in touch with you. And then finally, you'll have a flyer with the schedule of events for the week. You'll see that tonight we have Stories of Pain. So we're having an interview with Andy, who's a third-year engineer here at Durham, who lost his mum tragically this summer, and he'll be sharing about his experience of that. As well as a talk on the biggest problem in the world. That's all with a free hog roast, come on,
wow.
From 7:15 here. And then tomorrow we'll be back here for lunch, same time, same place, with the story for the hurting. Again, listening to Glynn talking about making sense of life's toughest times. So they're my three things I wanted to flag up. So for our first question for you, Glynn.
It's multitasking here, aren't you? Does anyone get me any water, by the way? If anyone could run it. Yes, thank you.
So,
do you mind? Thanks so much.
Is there a fine line between using your faith as a source of feeling self-worth and simply using it as an escape from reality? Should I say that again?
Yeah, no, does everyone get that? Is there a fine line between, is there a danger here, I think someone's saying, that you can see your faith as bringing ballast to your life, or indeed some kind of, you're putting your head in the sand and avoiding some of the realities, because life's tough. And there's danger. There's danger in everything that we'll kind of miss here or go to an extreme. And certainly, I wouldn't for a minute want to be seen as someone who's just got another answer to. We've tried the self-esteem movement, now let's try Christianity as the latest pill. I'm not at all. This is a byproduct of becoming a Christian. I think the most fundamental and important thing is to look at Jesus, his claims, and the possibilities for the reality of your life. That's the key bit. This is one of the many byproducts of what happens when you become a Christian. You've got to begin to start seeing yourself differently. And that involves quite some tough things, as well as some real, what Christians call blessings, like feeling loved in this way. So you want to make sure that no one should be thinking, wow, this might be the answer to my long-term problems with low self-esteem. I'll try Christianity. That isn't the route at all. It's a way of pointing us to, is there a bigger story going on that we can connect with that will impact on some of these other areas?
Yeah, that's great. That's really important. Thank you, Glynn. Would anyone like to respond to that? We've probably got a roaming mic somewhere. Yeah, Mark's got a mic. If anyone would like to respond to that or ask another question, we'd love to take a question from the floor.
Great.
Thank you.
Get the ball rolling. Did any come in on text? Or no, one or
Hi
two,
there.
maybe?
Is that working? Can you hear me?
You can text them in as well, I think. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah.
So why is there a requirement to have a God in order to see the worth in, say, you were giving the example of a homeless person, so to see the equal worth in all humans, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I don't think it's a requirement. It's not a requirement for there to be God to actually have a sense of self-worth. Psychologists, that isn't dependent on other people, you know. Psychologists, I mean, like Jennifer Crocker, she says the key thing is the failure of the self-esteem movement is it always forces us in on ourselves, thinking, how does this help boost my self-worth? She says this is bad for us in all kinds of ways. What we need to do is to be part of something bigger than ourselves and to work for that so that our focus is moved from inside to something larger that we're working for and that we're feeling part of, a story bigger than ourselves. She's not a Christian. She says, my story that's bigger than me is I'm an eco-warrior. She's really into ecology as a vision. And she says, but you've got to find your story. This isn't psychology. This is worldview. This is, what we understand the world to be like. So there are other ways. And of course, there are people who far outclass me in love for the homeless person and a sense of honoring their dignity who are not Christians. I think I'd want to have a conversation as to where, if it's not in some Christian framework, we get those values from. I think I'd want to have a conversation about that. But I don't think you have to be a Christian to love. Goodness me, no.
Great, thank you, Glynn, and thank you for your question. We are running out of time for those of you who do have lectures, so we are going to continue with questions and this Q&A time, so do text in any more questions or prepare to answer them, ask them from the floor. But for those of you who do need to head off, that's fine. We're going to take a couple-minute break. After the next section of Q&A, we would love to encourage you to go to the cafe. It's open till 4, and the first half an hour of drinks are free. Woo!
And do feel, please, come and do some pushback with me, and I'd love to talk about anything to anyone, so do come and talk more.
All right, we're gonna make a start again. So, like I said, those of you who are heading out, please do so quickly and quietly. Those of you who are still hanging around, there are now lovely empty chairs right in front of us. So, if you would like to come further forward, please feel free to do that. I'm going to kick off with a question from the text, but we'll come back to the floor afterwards. And as I said, keep texting in. So, this is our next question. Though I was raised a Christian, I don't think I've ever felt God's love in the way you describe. What can I do?
Yeah, that's great. So the question is, sounds good, and I'm a Christian. Why isn't it quite as good as it sounds for me? Which is a really good point. And if you remember, I was at pains to emphasize that this is a journey. It takes a long time because I often use a picture of human beings, and I got this, it's really Jonathan Haidt, a very well-known public intellectual, social psychologist in New York. He says the picture of the human being, it's like an elephant with a little man on top. And the elephant is our world of habits and subconscious and instincts, the things you don't need to think about, okay? And the little man on top, he's the rational side, he's the thinking bit, he's the person I'm talking to now in here, okay? So the man on top is listening to what I'm saying, the elephant underneath is thinking, you annoy me. You know, the way you do that with your hands. My father used to do that, I don't like it. You know, it's a kind of an instinctive reaction. And Jonathan Haidt, if you read his book, The Righteous Mind, it's a superb book, he shows how the elephant is a really big bit of us. The habits, the instincts, the ways we've always done things. And the little man on top says, well, that was an interesting talk. Or, I'm learning new things about being me, but it takes time for the elephant to be turned around. So we're talking about long-standing habits, deeply ingrained sense that I'm unloved, I'm unlovable, or I'm just not enough. And there are lots of things in our early psychological development that play into that. I'm just not enough. And so it's going to take time. And that's why Christian identity is all about disciple. The identity is, I'm a Jesus follower. That's my identity, which means that I'm in a learning. Discipleship means learning, and it's going to take time. I would say open your heart to God. Study the Bible, His Word. Seek out people who'll teach the Bible, who'll not only explain it to you, you want it to be explained, that's really important, but also convey something of its inspiration, its ability to lift your heart. Someone who can convey something of Jesus' love. Keep opening your heart to God and to His Spirit. Over time, it will come, this deeper sense of being loved right at the pit here.
That's great. Thank you, Glynn. And if that was your question and you're still here,
and come and chat.
Come and chat to Glynn, come and chat to us. We'd love to chat with you more and maybe pray with you about that. Is there anyone who would like to raise a question from the floor?
Hi there. I don't know if it's that specific to today's topic, but I was just wondering, what do you think's happening when...
A bit louder, yeah.
Sorry. What do you think's happening when people around the world who sort of start a relationship with Jesus and would be Christian and sort of have that connection with God, but then obviously sort of fall short or actively pursue things that you wouldn't consider sort of kind or moral or loving, you know, like FGM in Ethiopia or homophobia and a lot of things. And often it's not just that they passively have it, but they actually often sort of use stuff from the Bible and things as a backup. Has something gone wrong with their relationship with God? Like,
great.
What do you think?
I don't know that I've got an easy... That's a big question. It's a great question, actually. Because what you're up against, when you look at... Basically, it's what Christians do. And why quite a bit of what Christians do and have done is kind of doesn't reflect what they're supposed to be about. I think that's the question, isn't it? And one of the stories that Jesus told was, he said, the kingdom of God, you know, it's like a sower that goes out to sow, and the seed falls on good ground and not so good, and some flowers flourish for a while and then die because the word never really rooted. They got swept up into a religious phase or into a particular set of social circumstances, and they're not really developed a deep sense of personal relationship with God. So you've got that kind of mixed economy of the church, wheat and tares. You've also got, I think, the reality that a lot of, well, we're all cracked. People come into faith, and it's a journey of being put together again by God. And it's a slow journey. It's a long journey. And, you know, I think of when Jesus walks along, he's walking along, and he looks up into a tree, and there's a guy called Zacchaeus. You may know, heard of him. He's a local hood, a racketeer. It could be that he's a mafiosi type, And Jesus stops and says, I'm coming to your house for tea. And people are actually really astonished that Jesus would even begin to associate with someone like a racketeer. Who's Jesus getting entangled with? Now, actually, Zacchaeus becomes a follower, but he's got a lot of unraveling to do, not only of his relationships, but in his own heart. And that's going to take time. So Christians do mean things. They really love the Lord sometimes, but they get caught, their instinctive responses, they're not good. And that's why repentance and repeated saying sorry is a big part of Christian growth. You say, I blew that. When I sounded judgmental for that guy, I remember that's how my dad used to talk about people like that, and now I understand it's a violation of the way of Christ. So there's kind of mixed economy there's nominal churchmanship. People just go to church, they say they're Christians, but that brings power in that particular society. And then there's Christians who are just learning, getting it wrong, and they've got a lot to learn still. So I think, do you want to come back on that? That's the best I can do just now, I think.
Yeah,
Should we talk about it afterwards? Or,
yeah, just building on that, do you think like it would be good to do more kind of as in, like obviously there's a lot of bringing more people to faith, but do you think there should be more focus on actually helping the people who have already sort of accepted Jesus but aren't, they have that broken connection? Should there be more of an effort
become
to
more like him?
And then potentially in the long term, more people would turn to it because you would look across the board and it would be a cohesive
What a
thing.
great point. Yeah. I don't know whether there should certainly be more of the second. It'd be great if we could do it without less of the first, but there should certainly be more of because the Christian faith is a lot about telling, proclaiming, but actually it's a huge bit about showing as well. You shouldn't be telling anything that you're not prepared, that you can't show is real. And if you read Rodney Stark, who was an anthropologist, he wasn't a Christian at the time when he wrote his seminal book, The Rise of Christianity. Rodney Stark would say the phenomenal growth of Christianity over the first 3 centuries was a lot due to the ways of life the early Christians brought, which was radically different from the Greco-Roman culture. And people, the pagans looked in and they noticed that Christians had as many girls as boys, because they wouldn't do expositio, which is to expose unwanted children, particularly girls. And they noticed how Christians lived ways that were different. And in the end, they said, gosh, that's hard, but I like that. And I take your challenge to me. It's show me as well as tell me. It's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you. And just sort of off the back of that, if you're looking at the CU to question why we have a focus on telling people about Jesus, that's what we do as a CU. Churches love to grow and shape people to be more like Jesus, and so if that's something you would love to see more of, I definitely would recommend going to a church and asking them about it. Does anyone else sitting out have a question for Glynn?
Well, you've let me off the hook.
We have one other question on the text.
Before we get that, can I just say, either after this or grab me, be around tonight or at any time, particularly if you think, I think there might be something in this, but I want to talk a bit more. Please just come and grab me, won't you? I'd love to talk. Yeah,
definitely. This is a little bit off topic, but perfectly fine. Glynn, how would you describe the Trinity?
Only a tiny bit off topic.
Or maybe, there might be people saying you have no idea what that word means.
Yeah, I can see where that question came from, because
the
we had there the Father sending the Son, in John there. And so the first word that comes to mind for the Trinity is mystery. Mystery. And actually, it doesn't bother me that there's things I don't understand. You train as a psychiatrist, folks, you'll soon get used to not understanding things. I promise you that. The relationship, human consciousness. We've been working at this for years. Still, the philosophical and neuropsychological challenges of even answering the question, what is consciousness? Huge gap, hole in our knowledge. The resolution between general relativity and quantum mechanics. I'm out of my pay grade pretty quickly on that. Genomics, gene-to-environment interaction, intragenome interactions. So complex. I remember sitting on a television program, 1979, and a discussion program, and she picked up next day's newspaper, and it says, gene for schizophrenia discovered. And she said, look at this, brand new finding. I did say I'm almost certain that won't hold up because it's a multi-genetic thing. I knew enough about schizophrenia then. No, it was very complex genetically, far more. But newspapers like simple headlines, you see. I can tell you now, how long is it since 1978? 40 years, something like that, 30 years? The genetics of schizophrenia are so complicated, they've just got more complicated and harder to understand. So I'm really used to not understanding stuff. So I don't understand this wonderful truth that God is one God, but three persons. And each of those persons is God, but there is one God. Don't understand. But it's a life-giving truth for me, because it means I relate to God in slightly different modes at different times. And when I want a sense of seeing the face of God, I look at Jesus. When I as a human being instinctively look for a sense of fatherhood and oversight to my life, I relate to him as Father. When I'm sitting at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm angsting about something, as happens sometimes, then the closeness of God's Spirit there, right close, is what I sense. So I can't explain the logical problems that the Trinity, but folks, we've just got little brains. And the brain is the most complex thing in the universe, but they're still, compared to the glory of God, you think you're going to get your head around him? Don't worry so much, It's just a truth that we have to, for the moment, accept, and one day we'll see much, much more of.
Great, thank you, Glynn. Does anyone have a final question from the floor?
Thank you so much for staying, folks.
Yeah, Glynn will be sticking around. If you want to ask him anything, do hang around in the cafe, grab a drink, continue discussing these things with each other. And we may well see you tonight at 7:15. Thanks for coming.